Buenos nachos, amigos, and welcome to another fantastic episode of Record Breakers. I am PD Ray, your man with no plan. Here with me is my surprisingly still ailing trio of friends. Another week of illnesses. We have none other than Brett.
Hey.
We've got Patrick.
Hello.
And we've got Drew.
Hey.
We are gathered. Wrong camera. We are gathered once again to talk about music, and the provider of the music this week is none other than Drew himself. Drew, what do you got for us this week?
Well, this is a little band from El Paso, Texas. As I said last week, they came from the remnants of a post-hardcore band by the name of At the Drive-In. They sort of wanted to do something a little experimental, little concept, little weirdness. They wanted to try some new things, and from that came the band known as the Mars Volta.
Mm-hmm. It is definitely a fascinating group, to say the least. Patrick, I imagine you have had a little bit of an expectation coming into this album. You had a little bit of foreknowledge. What expectations did you have?
There was a time, not that long ago, where this album was in my iTunes. And it was because my brother is a huge Mars Volta fan, and, you know, we have enough overlapping music that I've a lot of stuff. He passes me, said, "Oh, you have to listen to this." And then I do, and sometimes I love it, and sometimes I don't. And we'll get into how I feel about the Mars Volta later.
And then, of course, Brett, what expectations did you have coming into this album?
I had no clue what this was. I don't run in the circles that listen to this stuff, nor do I actually have any way of thinking, how would I come across this? I was a little surprised when I dove into this, and I was like, okay, where has this been, and how have I dodged this? Because I guess it's a thing.
Mm-hmm. It's a thing with Molly Wood and Tom Merritt. Yes, it is. It's definitely a thing. Call out. Drew, what would you say would be the themes and elements that make up this record? What makes it?
But like the thing about this record, as I said, it's a bit experimental. They grab from a lot of different inspirations from like the last band, the jazz fusion, the hard rock, the Latin rhythm, stuff like that. They're known for being very energetic, very manic, on stage, and every album being sort of like a book, right? Like they write each separate story, in the album, and it can be consumed that way. Before this album came out, though, the original bass player who played on the EP, and that was about it, Ava Gardner, she had to leave the band. Her father passed, and there was complications while they were touring, so she left the band. That left a hole in the bass section during recording, which was filled by a guy named Michael Peter Balzari. You might know him better as the Red Hot Chili Peppers' Flea. Ava wrote a couple of the bass lines, but a lot of it was written by Flea, so you get a really cool, really funky underlying bass there, with a lot of runs and a lot of cool technicality, because it's Flea, that's kind of what he does. The guitars sway from more clean, straight-up stuff to like dissonance, and that is to push forward the story, sort of the idea in this record that Serpentax, the main character, is in a coma, a drug-induced coma from near overdose. And it's the story of him fighting inside his own mind and stuff like that. So you get dissonance, you get the manicness, you get staccato rhythms, but it's all taking in many, many different forms from front to back, which I think is really cool, and they do it in a really neat way, I think.
Mm-hmm. Patrick, what would be the themes and elements that stood out for you?
On paper, I should love the Mars Volta. It is prog rock, but with a punk edge. In the same way that Coheed and Cambria kind of did it in a different manner, but prog rock, but played by, kids from punk bands. And for whatever reason, and I do not still to this day, after re-listening to this album, know why, I don't like the Mars Volta. I think they're ludicrously talented people. I think they just don't write music I care about for whatever reason. I don't like Cedric's voice. I just never have. Omar Rodriguez Lopez can play guitar, but he runs it almost through too many effects, and I hate saying that. Sometimes I love that stuff. But it's prog rock played by very talented people, but with a punk edge to it, and that's sort of, in my mind, how, if you were going to pitch the Mars Volta, that's how I would pitch it, I guess.
Brett, what would be the theme songs that caught your attention? What did you think made it tick?
Well, they had the bass by the man who portrayed Douglas J. Needles in Back to the Future Part 2. That doesn't hurt.
Or
but,
Cousin Donnie in The Wild Thornberries.
But surprisingly, it didn't stand out as much. There's one thing that stood out more than anything on this album to me, and that was the drums. They were like cranked to 11 all the time. They were either on or off, and when they were on, they were on, and there was so much drums right in your face. And they also had some funky weird space noises that they used to pretty good effect. I mean, they've come a long way since 2112 when it comes to ambient space noises. But this album had it, and they had it in spades. But otherwise, I mean, it technically is a really great album. There was a lot of complexity to every single song, and it was a lot to the point where you couldn't really tell. I couldn't tell one song to the other because they were telling a tale in every song, and every song seemed to run on for quite some time. Not just because they did, but also because they built up and ran their course, and it sort of had a lot of ups and downs, a lot of depth to it. But they definitely wrote this album in a very very reminiscent of the of prog rock that I listen to, where it's kind of weird, it kind of runs along a little long, but the drums are always there to keep you going.
If I can cut you off, Petey, before you go on to your thoughts, the funny story about that is that this album, they were actually sort of forced to cut into smaller sections of songs. Yeah. The longest being, I think, the Sikatraz ESP. But the next album, Francis the Mute, the record label said, okay, we sort of understand that, you guys we wanted you to break it up so it was more easily digestible. That's never going to be a thing that's going to go on the radio. This is not going to be easily digestible on the radio. Do whatever you want. So you had a lot more longer songs. You had a lot more of the 9, 10, 11, 12 minute songs on that one, which I think was, kind of what they wanted to do with this one. But, the label was like, hey, could you maybe cut this song in half and that song in half? And it was this weird thing, but sorry, Petey.
Yes. No, it's because it's funny because I knew of Mars Volta. I know the sound, and of course I know the voice they hear as vocals because I have listened to quite a bit of at least a few songs of At the Drive-In, and that I fondly remember of the many post-hardcore groups that I thoroughly enjoyed when they were doing their thing. But yeah, this is definitely a really cool, oddly fun record. But I definitely hear what you guys are talking about with, what Patrick is talking about, and what Brad is talking about, when you talk about this record. But let's get into some key tracks. Drew, what would you say would be some of the key tracks?
Well, the first 2 songs were released as a single. So I'm going to talk about them together, and that would be something like Lumeri and the Inertiatic ESP, if I'm pronouncing those wrong, which I'm probably not, because I don't know if you can hear me or not. So the Lumeri leads in slow as the opening, right? And it creates this feeling of you sort of walking into the story, and it's based on, Serpentex is based on an actual guy named, Julio, Venegas. And this is, very much taking from the beginning, him going into a coma, and then, the death at the end, which we'll get to, is very much his life. So it's like, it paints this picture of walking in to the hospital, but then you very quickly go into the manic nature of his own mind and him in his coma trying to like fight the more evil, messed up side of him, throughout the rest of the record. The sort of swings up and down is what pushed me in, to this band. It was the first song I heard from them, and it sort of really, in my opinion, sucks you in, and, for me, made me want to learn more about what they were doing and what the story was all about. Then Drunk Ship of Lanterns. The Latin rhythms in Drunk Ship of Lanterns, in the percussion section was just right in the forefront. But it takes its dark, brooding look, at it. The bends on the guitar, playing into the nature of that. You never became comfortable during the song, in my opinion. You sort of had that off-putting nature, which again plays into this. And, it was weird because I didn't know this until doing research for it. I thought I'm very away. This is weird saying as, a guy who critiques music. But I am very far away from music critics, so I don't really know what's going on. I don't know what they like besides I Need Snarky Puppy won a Grammy once, and like that's about all I've known for the past couple of years. So like Drunk Ship of Lanterns actually in 2011 got named the 91st best guitar song by Rolling Stone, which I thought was kind of interesting. And I think it is mostly because of the way the guitars work and the way they're composed within the song and what they do. And then the final song, Take the Veil, Serpentax, follows like the real story of Julio, follows after he comes out of the coma. He can't really see himself going in anymore, and it takes this really dark, like, he won, but he never really won sort of turn, and all of it sort of ends on this really dark, brooding note from the music to the lyrics of it, which I think is really cool. And really sort of ends, this sort of dedication to an artist and a friend of the band that I think is really, I don't want to say it's fun, but it's really well done. And, I still love listening to it. I really like the way all of that folds in, so.
Yeah. Patrick, what would be some of the key tracks that caught your attention?
So I'm going to do the opposite of what, key tracks usually is, which is the stuff we liked. And I'm going to talk about what I think. Coming back to this, I haven't listened to this album in a couple of years, but when I used to have it, I would always try to listen to it, and I never liked it. And I think I figured out why. I think it might literally just be the production of this record. There's a couple of times where sometimes music's dense because there's 11 instruments. Sometimes music's dense because they're just trying to shove too much shit into 4.5 minutes of music. And it's sort of, I think it's what Drew was trying to say. They're trying to capture this sort of manic character, but I feel like it's in prog rock, like part of being taken seriously is you being good musicians. And I won't question the musicianship here. They know how to play their instruments and they know how to do it well. But I feel like coming out of a post-hardcore band, they wanted to be taken seriously. So they did a lot of like, what I would almost call like try hard, like in the way that like try hard rap tries just a little too hard. It gets a little try hard prog rock where they're being, I think, overly chaotic and trying to play weird dissonant stuff. And towards the end, there's kind of this weird looped semi-random note guitar line that I'm like, it doesn't resolve for the sake of not resolving, because resolving would be like not cool enough. And that's how it comes off to me. And I doubt that that's actually what they were going for, but it just, everything feels like they were trying really hard to be prog rock rather than, if you look at a band like Rush just wrote good songs that happened to be 8 minutes long until weird stories about space monsters and stuff. This is like trying. I feel like they listened to 21st Century Schizoid Man by King Crimson. There's a really good part in that where the guitar and there's a snare drum run that follows the guitar, and they heard that and they wanted to do that for a whole album, and it that works in that song, one, because it's played so perfectly and cleanly, and also because it is a 30-second piece of a larger piece of music. And I don't know if it's the production, I don't know if it's just this album, maybe their other stuff is better. I feel like if it was just 5 guys on a stage, it would probably work better than having all of this time to layer 50 things. And I hated the filtered vocals, which were like on every single track. There's a lot of people who love sticking an effect or a filter on a vocal, and it just annoys me for one reason or another. It's a weird personal gripe. And I'm not a big fan of Cedric's voice. And I usually like the weird, screamy, high-pitched people. And I don't understand why I don't like this. But I do actually, if I'm going to pick one, I do like the opener, Intertiatic or Inertiatic ESP is kind of fun, and the drums on it are unbelievable. That is sort of the one thing on this record I can jive with, is the drums are fantastic. And also, how do you have Flea on a record and he doesn't slap a goddamn bass once?
He hasn't slapped a bass in years.
Yeah.
He specifically in the mid-90s said, that's what everybody knows me for. I'm stopping it.
I know he's an incredible musician, and I give him 100,000 points for not being Flea, but you can't have, like, on an album full of crazy, wacky guitar solos, you can't put Flea on there just once, like 20 seconds of him ripping.
He doesn't. He can't slap anymore. He doesn't do it. Like, he refuses.
He can.
The Red Hot Chili Peppers tried, and they can't get him to do it. It's not going to happen. Also, Rick Rubin was the producer, if you're wondering if that.
I know, and I was looking at the stuff he was producing at this time, and this was not a good Rick Rubin era. I think the only good album in this sort of like 4 or 5 year period he did was Toxicity. Everything else was Limp Bizkit records and stuff.
That's a conversation for a different day.
Yeah. But yeah, Brett, what would be some of the key tracks for you that caught your attention?
Well, let me just start out with being like, I am not as emotional about this. And also, Drew, if it weren't for that horse, I wouldn't spend that year in college. But, no, when it comes to, tracks, Roulette Dares, The Haunt of, that had some really good guitar tone. I enjoyed the tone of the guitar in that track. And again, had some pretty bitchin' space noise. Can't get mad about the space noise. You're allowed one genre of music to make space noises. This is it. Drunk Ship of Lanterns. I really, really dug the bass and the drums. The Latin beat fit in really well. Of the entire album, these are the 2 tracks that stood out to me, which is kind of sad because this had so much more going on. It was like a tangle of musical wires that I had trouble digging through. Like, there was so much skill that was being shown, but it was layered deep and put through a blue filter and with some space noises thrown onto it. So I get both of the if you aren't into that, I can see that. But if you if you could listen to this album enough, which I don't think I have enough to actually find the deep meaning behind everything and every choice, but there is some gold in their hills. I just wasn't there with a shovel trying to dig for it, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that those are some interesting perspectives. And then we kind of bring her back around the horn. To Patrick, what would be your conclusion about the album overall?
If there is a Mars Volta album where they took 10 steps back and sort of cut out all the excess noise, I think I might find joy in it. This particular record there's just so much going on, and it's not in a good way, at least for me, that it kind of just feels like a mess. There's little moments where you'd get 20 or 30 seconds of something brilliant, and then the chaos would hit again, and it wasn't like the good kind of chaos that I sometimes like. It was I think they had too much money and too much time to make it, and because of that, they were able to do things 50 times and overdub 90 times. And what they really needed was someone to just tell them to stop and make the songs. But that's me. That's my opinion. I'm probably wrong.
Brett, what would be your conclusions about the album overall?
This is a really, really deep album. There's a lot going on, like I said. It's something that if you can get beyond wanting a small, bite-sized piece of music. I mean, I'm a guy who listens to some really weird shit. I dig the weird. This thing that they brought the weird. It's a very different kind of weird. It's like weird zero. It's not diet weird. It's not full sugar weird. It's a kind of weird that I am not mad at. I couldn't get behind it fully. Not that I don't hold with it, but there's some enjoyable pieces to it. I guess if I could come back to this and I'm in the mood for something like this more than I was, while I was listening to it over the last couple weeks, then maybe, I'll have a different feeling for it. But man, there's a lot going on here. Like trying to pick out all the little bits and pieces they're throwing into this, is a feat. I don't know who the guy who mixed this must have had a freaking heyday. He earned his money. Like there's some layers.
Yeah. there's some layers. Them layers, son. Drew, what would be your rebuttal?
I'm not going to say a rebuttal. I completely understand where both of them are coming from. And that's the reason I actually picked this, to be completely honest. I love the Mars Volta. I really like what they do. I really like the stories that they tell. I think they have a lot of depth to them. And I've realized I've been coming with more kind of simple music for a while. Simple, like, sort of pop punk stuff, and then, like, ska, like, always. And there's depth to all that music, but there's not as much as there is, say, in, like, the prog experimental scene, right? But it isn't for everyone, and I will readily admit that. But to me, I wanted to show something of, like, okay, well, these guys delved into their side of, like, weird, overcomplicated, like, really, puzzly sort of music. And I wanted to do my take on it. And that's what the Mars Volta is to me. When I want to think too much for a day, I put on this or Francis the Mute or, like, any of the other, like, great, in my opinion, great, Mars Volta records. It's something that I think if you're into either concept albums, sci-fi, or sort of taking apart music piece by piece, you might be able to find something here. If you're not, you probably won't find anything here.
I will also say it's not a bad album to kind of get lost in. Just on my level. I think I'm definitely more towards on your side, Drew. I'm on your side, Drew. Like we're gonna be at each other's throats or anything like that. Pugilism.
Hey, he was nicer to me than I was about La Tigre. So
hey, like I said, I might be completely wrong about this because I should like this. In every reason, I like a lot of post-hardcore, although I was never a big At the Drive-In fan. I can't hate. But it just doesn't do it for me. But, that's how music is.
Yeah, that's how music is. But that's it. That's our thoughts on the album. Now we get to our main event of the evening. It's going to be interesting to go through this. With our haiku reviews. I will start us off, because I don't know if I did a good job explaining the music, but I felt like I just wanted to make a reference. My haiku: wild, progressive, music delivered wielding, a one-armed scissor. Patrick, what is your haiku?
I don't like this one. Never have and don't know why. It's kind of a mess.
Brett, what is your haiku?
Decent album from exceptionally deep band, Music Spaghetti.
I like that. Drew, fittingly of the spaghetti. Drew.
Racist.
Red sauce.
Racist.
As long as you don't call me a Guido. Musically deep story of a lost friend and fellow artist.
Mm-hmm. And that is our thoughts on the Mars Volta. Of course, you can play along at home. Record Breakers the home game, like I would say, on our Spotify playlist. This is going to be on it. On it will also be next week's artist, presumably. And I believe we're going to have Roberto Villegas, one Vincent 404 on next week in some form or another. We'll make it work. I don't know what album he'll bring, but it might be chiptunes. Probably. I don't know. Probably going to.
He'll bring the album
Forever Famicom
by
Random aka Megaran.
And it'll be fun. You'll find it on our Spotify playlist.
Exactly. Or not. Or you will. I don't know. But you'll know by the time, you hear this. You'll know once you follow us on Twitter and all the things. You can find us all over the internet. Patrick is at The Swagger. Brett is at Hibbity Bibbard, HIBBITYBIBBARD. Drew is at XJuciferX. I'm at PD Rave. The show is at 4 Record Breakers. That's the number 4 Record Breakers. That's also where you're going to find out what the album is. Because I'll go ahead and tweet it out there. The show is at recordbreakerspodcast.com. You can email us at recordbreakerspodcast@gmail.com. You can find us on iTunes, Stitcher, subscribe, like, share on all the things. YouTube.com/RebelliTV. For the videos, there should be some videos up there. Check out the videos from South by Southwest. All the shenanigans I did there. Jury Mania videos are going to be up there. I presume. Now I've committed to it. Yes, I definitely did it because it's in the past. But that's it. Until next time. Hasta los huevos.
De-Loused.